So, I love road trips. I'm not looking at you right now because I'm driving. I'm trying to make a point here. I don't want to be in the car to make the point. And I'm going to do the whole sermon in the car this week. So, if you don't see me on Sunday, it's because it went horribly wrong. As you can see, I'm stopped. That's why I looked at the camera. But I love road trips. So I thought, to use kind of this theme and motif of a road trip, I would just be in my car. And, product placement. Oh no! And I love road trips for a multitude of reasons. Growing up, we took a lot of road trips. I love listening to music when we're on a road trip. Ooh, just going through the catalog. Sometimes I'll make a playlist. Sometimes I'll just go through some of my favorites on Spotify. Sometimes I'll listen to albums that I've been putting off. Or growing up with my dad, he always put on the radio and we never knew what we were going to get. Here, I'll try it. Let's see. What are we going to do?
Fatal Attraction. All new.
Well, okay, that was weird. But my dad would always try to sing along with the radio, but the problem is my dad doesn't know any words to any song. And so he would just be like, it's the eye of the tiger, it's the man in the fight, welcome up to the bottom of my back. Gibberish! Just gibberish! Never knew the words to anything. But I still have fond childhood memories of taking road trips and listening to my dad try to remember the words to a single song on the radio. And I would sing too, but then I feel like he hypocritically be like, hey Matt, figure out the words first. I'm just like, what? So, road trips are always fun. I also like talking on road trips. You get some deep conversation. You really get to know someone. Or sometimes, quite frankly, you have pointless conversation, which is honestly my favorite conversation. I love talking about nothing. That's my favorite thing to ever talk about. Nothing's my favorite thing. I could talk about minutia all day. Or I could ask questions all day. So if you've watched an Ask Me Anything, I could ask questions all day. That's another one of my favorite things about a road trip is just asking pointless, stupid questions. Or asking people like what their top 5 is. Like top 5 musicians all the time. Top 5 movies. And then like debating that stuff. I love road trips. The time together. I love the in-between. I love it. The one time I did hate it, however, was my dad one time, as you normally are when you're a child, and we were going on a family vacation, and we had an old school, it was called a conversion van. Google it, kids. Y'all don't know what that is. And there was a TV in the back, and I'm stopped here so I can do it. And my dad would recline his seat so far back that he would actually sit back and watch the TV instead of driving. That's right. My man would watch TV instead of drive. And so there'd be a second where my dad would start to comment on the movie, and he'd be like, is this the second or third one? And we'd be like, Dad, watch the road! So, despite my dad's shenanigans, I always loved road trips as a kid. And I think it's so much fun to take a road trip because as someone who has such a little attention span like me, or thin attention span, I love how everything is constantly changing. Everything is in flux. Everything is in passing. Nothing stays the same. Nothing is static. Nothing is consistent. I've driven across America before. We did that my senior year of high school. We drove across the U.S. And I loved it because you just would get all kinds of different landscapes and environments. You have people with different accents. You have, you're in the South, everything's covered with a thick green film of pollen. And, you drive through some states and you just get like gnats the size of your fist. I just like the changing environment. Sometimes you have mountains, like in Missouri, they have these beautiful hills, these rolling hills in Missouri, limestone hills. It's awesome. So I love a good road trip. And I don't know, the fact that everything is constantly changing and is never consistent, I think it's kind of adventurous. I like that. But road trips aren't for everyone. And some people are a bit less adventurous. And they're not so much about the constant change and the flux, and they just want to get there. And so, especially if it's a long road, like if you got a long road ahead of you, like the cross-country trip I took, well, then, not everyone's going to love that. And my wife, for instance, she does not like long road trips. She just wants to get there. She ain't trying to mess around and get car sick and have to stop at nasty gas stations and use bathrooms that look like a crime scene investigation. She's not about that. She just wants to get there. So she didn't appreciate it quite as much. And I get why. And especially, and this will get into what we're talking about, if it's a long road. You know, she don't have the patience for that because she's not enjoying herself. Or some people don't like long road trips because of just the sheer unpredictability of them. They're uncertain. You don't know what kind of traffic you're going to get. You're not going to know what weather you're going to get. I had to go to Charlotte a year ago for a weekend for this seminary class, and I got halfway there, and then bam, this rainstorm hit like I've never experienced in my life. I couldn't see anything. I might as well just not put my wipers on. I couldn't see anything, and it was I could not predict it. It was unpredictable because the weather here was really nice. Or I've told this story. I won't tell the whole thing, but one time we were going to drive from Detroit, Michigan to Grand Rapids, Michigan. If you know anything about Michigan, that's across the state. And in Atlanta, when we left, the weather was fine. And when we landed in Detroit, it was snowy, but not terrible. Well, then, all of a sudden, people always say that, sudden, all of a sudden, bam, blizzard hits. And it's so bad that, again, I cannot see anything. We're like the only ones on the road. It's like 2 a.m. And I'm having to lean over like this and just watch mile markers. It's bad because I couldn't see anything, just the reflection of the very faint light off of the mile markers. And so that road trip wasn't really pleasant because there's so much uncertainty and unpredictability, and we didn't know the weather was going to be that bad, and we didn't know if we were going to get to Grand Rapids in one piece. It was a mess. And similarly, I took a trip one time to New York City, and we were like halfway there. No, not even halfway there. We are probably like a quarter of the way there, and we were driving an RV, and the tires blew out, and we had to end up getting rental cars, and I'm 6'3", I had to sit like on the hump in the middle the whole way there for however long, like 16 hours. I don't even know how long it was. It was ridiculous, and it was terrible. So yeah, road trips aren't for everyone, but I love them. And even though they can be a little long at times, I'm here for that. Even though they can be a little uncertain, I'm kind of here for that. And, you know, even if they can be unpleasant, like the trip to New York I described. The one thing that always makes up for everything on every road trip is stopping for coffee, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee real quick. Got my cup of coffee. What'd it do? So, some people are into road trips, and some people are not into road trips. And some people are into them like me because it's just constant change and it's exciting and nothing's the same and everything keeps going in the rearview mirror and you're moving forward. And yeah, it's a little uncertain and unpredictable, and yeah, sometimes it can be unpleasant, but I'm good with it. And then there's others that don't like road trips because everything keeps changing, and so, you know, you just keep passing stuff by and you can't really get comfortable or post it up or adapt it to one thing, and it can be uncertain and perhaps unpleasant. So road trips, not for everybody. And so I want to use this as kind of a guiding metaphor for today, kind of a illustration today as we're in this like COVID-19 thing. And I think this COVID-19 thing, it's like this long road trip we're all on together. And the weird thing about it is we don't actually know what the destination is. We don't know where we're at in the trip. You know, yeah, I'm going to sound so old, but I didn't grow up with like having a map on my phone that would tell me like, turn left ahead. I just had to, you know, have my mom be like, slow down and turn left ahead. Like that was my GPS back in the day. Or just, you know, people in the backseat be like, Matt, quick, slamming on the brakes, turn right. That was GPS when I was younger. We didn't have these maps that would tell us like, 10 miles till you reach your destination. So, I mean, growing up, I could ballpark how far we'd be away from something, but I didn't have a phone to tell me exactly. And I feel like we're kind of on that with COVID. We don't know where we're on the journey, like what place we're on in the journey. Are we kind of getting to the end of it? Are we there? Are we transitioning now? Do we have like a ways to go? And so one of the things to deal with the uncertainty of this is I'm just pretending, and I think it's fairly accurate, I'm just pretending like we have a long road ahead of us. I don't think it's just going to, you know, we're going to wake up one day and they're going to go, well, COVID-19 was over. That was weird. No, I think it's going to be a minute. No, I think there's going to be changes, adaptations. They've already opened some things, and the states are already talking about reopening plans. So I think things are going to look different, but I still think this is a long road ahead of us. And so I thought the theme, the metaphor, and the illustration of a road trip was appropriate for this. And in COVID-19, just like on a road trip, things are consistently inconsistent. Things are constantly changing. Things are constantly going in the rearview mirror. We're constantly acclimating to something, and then, whoop, now it's different. But we're moving forward. And so I would suggest to you that whether you're a road trip person or not so much a road trip person, you're like, dude, get me on a plane and get me done with this in like 2 hours. Let's go. However you are, with COVID, if you're like, hey man, I'm kind of adapting to this, I've kind of acquiesced to this, I'm kind of good with it. Or you're like, oh my gosh, I was done after a week. Can we just get back to normal? I would suggest that in life, it's good to stay mobile. Be able to be flexible. Be able to adapt to change. Be able to, no matter what the situation and circumstance, just be able to just adapt to it and move. And throughout that, place your trust in the Lord, not on your circumstances, because those are going to change constantly. I'm 33, and I can tell you that with some old man wisdom and some truth and veracity behind it. And so I want to use an illustration. It's something we've talked about frequently, even in this series, this What If series. But I want to talk about the children of Israel. And they had this movement as a people from being less permanent to more permanent, and then right back to less permanent, working towards more permanence. So, for example, they're enslaved in Egypt, and they call upon the Lord. They gather together, and they call upon the Lord. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when we talked about the church gathered and the church scattered. So they meet together and they cry out to the Lord, and that's kind of how they met together when they were in Egypt. But then they're liberated from Egypt, and they're in the wilderness. And we talked about, you can read about this in the book of Numbers, which is actually called in Hebrew Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness. We talked about that last week. So, hey, by the way, session stand for all your coffee needs. But then they're in the wilderness, and they still manage to gather together, because that's just what they do, and cry out to the Lord and thank Him for His faithfulness and fidelity and goodness and kindness to them. And they would just meet in like tents, and like random tents, or like around random places. But then, to have a little bit more permanence, bit more permanent structure, they actually build this big, elaborate, ornate tent called the tabernacle. And they meet in the tabernacle, and they gather there, and they worship the Lord, and they thank Him for His goodness and kindness and grace. But then they get into the promised land. And when they're in the promised land, it takes them a while, but they eventually move from just like these temporary structures to a more permanent one called a temple. And they build this big, just ridiculous temple, this mansion-looking palatial estate temple. And that was kind of believed to be like the permanent seat of God's presence. And so they moved from, less permanence to more permanence. And they just kind of get posted up in the temple, and they just kind of get comfy, and they get cozy, and now they're not in the wilderness anymore, they're in the promised land. And so they're just used to kind of being established, having things go their way. But then, because of their disobedience and their unfaithfulness and their turning away from the Lord, they actually have to go through some punishment, and they go into exile. And so they get taken off to a far land. And we've talked about this like a bajillion times. And so then all of the permanence they had, all of the security they had, it all goes out the door because the situation changes. And through that, they just have to work with it. And we even talked about how the prophet Jeremiah says, sorry guys, you're going to go into exile for a long time. But don't worry, get cozy there, get comfortable there, and kind of thrive there. And what I think is really interesting, I think this kind of plays into this whole like long road ahead of you, this whole like, man, being able to be mobile and not having to be permanent and fixed somewhere. I think there's benefit, and I think there's this like freedom is the word I'll use. There's a freedom in being able to be mobile and be flexible. And even when Jeremiah tells the people of Israel, hey, just, you're going to go to this place and just kind of get comfortable there. Get comfortable in this land you're going to go to. He's kind of telling them, like, just be mobile, like be able to be in the promised land and be able to be here. Like, just be okay with both. And again, there's a freedom into that, and you can kind of find a home wherever you're at. I think there's a great profit in being able to adapt to things. And for instance, I think it was my senior year. Yeah, my senior year. And maybe seniors, you can resonate with this. My senior year was a really funky year for me because my parents decided to sell our house that we'd been living in for most of my high school experience. And because they were showing it and they didn't want it to get messed up, we actually didn't even live in the house my senior year. Nah, we actually had an RV and we stayed in the RV my senior year. So I would wake up in the RV and then to go get ready in the morning, we had a little guest house that my aunt lived in. I would have to, like in my jams and like my gym shorts, it'd be like 30 degrees outside. I'd have to like run to the house and run to the guest house and take a shower and get ready in the morning. And it was just really hectic. Like all my stuff was in boxes. I was trying to live out of an RV with my dad and my brother and my sister, and then my other brothers in the guest house. And my dad, one of my brothers and me, we're like 6'3", 6'6", and 6'6". So like 3 dudes living in like the small RV. That was not the easiest thing in the world. And then, to make it worse, we had to move in with my grandma, who had the most rest in peace, she had the most grandma name of all grandma names. Helen. That's right, my grandma's name was Helen. And so we went and stayed at Helen's house. And here's the thing with Helen. She she had a legion of cats living with her, which I was like, Grandma, why you gotta be such a stereotype? And she didn't just have cats, but she had like cat swag. Like she had like cat sweaters, and she had like cat pins that she would wear, and like just cat pictures all over the place. She had all the cat swag. I think she had like teacups with like pictures of cats on them. I was like, Grandma, enough with the cats. It's enough that you have 12 cats. I don't need to see them and likenesses of them everywhere I turn. And so we moved in with my grandma, and the rest of my senior year is just covered in cat hair. Like, I stopped wearing black my senior year because I'd just be like, dude, what? I look like a lint roller. And it wasn't the easiest thing, and my whole family, there's a lot of us, and we had to like split up over her entire house, and it was weird. And then eventually, like February of my senior year, we finally moved into a house, or it was like late February. But it was weird. But the benefit is that it taught me to be flexible. It taught me to be mobile. It taught me to not have to be like, I have to have like my own room, my own temperature, my own way. No, I just kind of like, I just learned to roll with stuff. And it wasn't comfortable, but I made myself comfortable. And so it kind of reminds me of the children of Israel going into exile. And the prophet Jeremiah is like, hey guys, just get comfy, get cozy, just be okay with it. And I kind of had to do that. But moving forward in my life, that served me well because, I've been roommates with people in college that like they always had to have everything like thus, so in the room. And it made them very like stressed out, nervous people. They're like, oh my gosh, there's this noise at night. And I'm like, bro, that's just the air conditioning. You gonna be okay? Or like, oh my gosh, it's like 3 degrees hotter than I want it to be in here. I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like, wear shorts. I don't know what to tell you. So there's this benefit in being able to be mobile. And so, just like the children of Israel, I think in this time where none of us really know what's happening, everything is impermanent. I think there's profit in just finding a way to get comfortable. There's actually freedom in just being able to find yourself at home wherever you are. Wahoo, product placement. I think there's benefit in just kind of finding home wherever you're at. And I think wherever you're at, to the prophet Jeremiah's point, you should just still worship the Lord and thrive where you're placed. Just like the children of Israel thrived while they're in exile. We started the year talking about the book of Daniel, and we did a series called Coming in Hot, and we talked about how Daniel really was thriving when he was in Babylon. Yeah, that's because Jeremiah said, go to Babylon and thrive there. So my encouragement to you guys is in this time, stay mobile, stay flexible. Try to just find the freedom in being okay with not knowing, the uncertainty, as we're on this long road, as there's a long road ahead of us to get fully back to where we're going, or to where we want to be, and who even knows what that will look like. Stay mobile with it. Things are going to constantly be changing. Be okay with that. Find freedom in that. Find opportunity in that, and continue to worship God through that, and continue to thrive in that. So that's my encouragement to you guys. But as there is a long road ahead, I want to look at one other biblical narrative and kind of circling around and orbiting around the exile story. You see, the children of Israel were in exile for a while, but they don't stay there. They actually get to return back to the promised land. And it's not just like one day the king goes, all right, everybody, you're free to go. This is my royal decree. Go back to thou's homeland, and I'll see you later. Bro, not even close. The king is like, all right, you guys can go back. I mean, if you want to, I mean, you can. I'm not saying you have to leave, but I mean, do you guys want to go back? There's kind of this like reticence to go back, or there's like all these obstacles to where the people are like, oh, I don't even know, is it even worth it? So finally, small groups of the Israelites start going back to the Promised Land. And there's this one guy named Ezra, and he goes back to the Promised Land, back to the city of Jerusalem, and he tries to rebuild the temple. The temple for them was like the symbol. Again, it was a permanent fixture, and it made them feel secure and safe, and it was like a symbol for the greatness of their people and their connection with the Lord. And I think it was important to rebuild the temple, and even the Lord tells them, hey, like, go ahead and rebuild the temple. Show me where your priorities are. But it also, for the people, was a sign and symbol of the Lord's abiding favor with them and their security in the land. So Ezra goes back, rebuilds the temple, but man, as he's doing that, he realizes there's a lot of junk that they need to just straight up leave in exile. Like, they need to leave some stuff in Babylon. They picked up some bad habits. They picked up like some like false religion, and they have to repent of a lot of stuff when they get back into the Promised Land. And I mean, at the end of Ezra, like, they rebuild the temple, but like, they're not done as a people. Like, they have a long road ahead of them to get back to where they need to be. And in fact, the city is still in shambles, and the people kind of are in shambles. Like, they don't know what they're doing. They're not fully committed to the Lord. They picked up a lot of bad habits in exile, and they're quarantined, and they're social distancing from their homeland. Then this other guy, 20 years after Ezra finishes what he's doing back in Jerusalem, this guy named Nehemiah hears that the city walls are still destroyed. And I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. And Nehemiah weeps because he's like, what? My city's in shambles? I thought people were going back and rebuilding. And so Nehemiah feels the call to go back to the city and rebuild. But again, my man's got a long road ahead of him because he's got a lot of work to do. So long story short, he goes back to Jerusalem. It's this incredible story of him rallying the people, and they rebuild the wall. But even as he's working with the people, and even as they build the wall and have to rededicate it, he realizes that there's some stuff that they brought with them from exile, from their social distancing and their quarantine and exile from their homeland, that like is really bad, and they have to repent as a people and go, you know what? We've been unfaithful. We've turned away from you. We've turned away from each other. And it's once the city walls are rebuilt, it's not over. It's a longer road than Nehemiah predicted. And even by the end of Nehemiah, the people are kind of already starting to turn away from the Lord again. So, you know, put yourself in Nehemiah's shoes or sandals. He's probably just like, oh my gosh, seriously though? I thought we were done with this. So there's just a long road ahead of him. And so I think with us, with this COVID-19 thing, I don't think, you know, it's necessarily a quick fix. I don't think this is just going to be like, okay, like, well, it's June now. We're good to go. Woo! COVID was weird. No, I think it's going to be a little bit of a longer road. I think we're going to have constant change, just like on a road trip. I think we're going to have a lot of improvements. I think we have a lot to be hopeful and expectant and excited about. But I think we not only need to stay mobile and be okay with changes and adapt quickly, but I also think we have to be realistic about how long the road ahead of us is, and we need to be patient. So if I could tell you two things, I would tell you stay mobile, and I would tell you to stay patient. It's not. We don't know when things are happening, when things are changing, and we don't know what's going on, and we don't control that. And so kind of our baseline for all of this is just saying, hey, we're not in control. We've never been in control. And so we're just going to go ahead and just trust the Lord in this time. We're going to stay mobile. We're going to stay patient. And listen, patience and waiting is an important part of the spiritual life. Let me just go ahead and tell you that as you guys are young. It's a very important part of the spiritual life. So practice those two things in this time. And as you go to groups, I want you to talk about this. As I told you about, this journey Israel had from like less permanence to more permanence, and then being taken to exile, and they have to kind of get comfortable there, and they have to thrive, worship God and thrive there, and then they have this like long road back, and they realize, oh, there's stuff we probably need to leave in exile and stuff we need to like bring with us. I want you guys to talk about in group, what are some things that from this time that you've learned that you need to bring with you as we start heading out of COVID season or maybe towards normalcy? What's some stuff from this time that you're like, that was good, I want to keep that? And what are some things where you're like, bro, I don't know, I did some things during that time, or I got in some bad habits that like I probably just need to go ahead and like leave behind back in quarantine. Some stuff I just really need to like not do and not move forward with. And I don't know what those are for you. I mean, some things I know from my life that I want to take with me from this time is learning how to be comfortable at home. Again, it's kind of getting back to that whole like being mobile thing. I want to be okay with being home more. For me, rest was a big deal. It's like, oh man, I am never home and I never stop doing anything. And I think I would do way too much. So that's something I want to bring with me. But then there's been some other things during this time where I'm like, you know what? I think being home so much and being in one spot, there was times I struggled with like irritability a little bit where I was like, I was kind of like, I don't know, I was getting like agitated a little bit. So that's something I want to be aware of moving forward. I want to just go ahead and leave that back in quarantine. So, or like there were some times early on where I was just very fearful, and moving forward, I need to go ahead and like leave that back in the rear view. I need to go ahead and leave that in the rear view mirror. So as you go to groups, talk about that. What are some things that you need to leave behind you? And what are some of the things from this time you need to go ahead and bring forward? And then lastly, here's an encouragement. And this is the whole arc of the story of Israel, the whole arc of the Bible. I think wherever the Lord moves us, puts us, places us, we need to learn to find contentment there. We need to experience the freedom of being mobile. We need to make ourselves at home and be able to find a home wherever the Lord puts us. That will just make us well-adjusted people. That will benefit you more than you know in your life. I could give you like 15 more minutes on that, but who needs that? But our ultimate goal is to worship the Lord and thrive wherever He's placed us. But the children of Israel were always looking for like a physical place to do that. And I think a lot of people are always looking for like a physical place to do that. Like when I just get into this house, or like if I could just move here, or if I could just get to this financial status. Like this is stuff you guys will think about when you're older. I mean, you guys are more grown than I was in high school. You're probably already thinking about it. Most of you probably have like a retirement account at this point. 501k you're building into. But I don't think you're ever going to find your home in a location or in a place. The Bible teaches us to find our home and to find our identity in a person, Jesus. And I don't want to sound all Sunday school like the right answer is always Jesus, but that's the arc of the Bible. Like the temple eventually, even in Jesus' time, His people, the children of Israel, are back in the promised land. They've rebuilt the temple, and Jesus even like goes to the temple. But Jesus also says things like, no, I am the new temple. And then after Jesus' life, death, resurrection, and ascension, we find out about this event called Pentecost, and the Spirit, the Holy Spirit moves and is imparted to the followers of Jesus. And then it's almost like they become the temple. And so we don't need like a temple, like a fixed location like the Israelites needed. We don't need a promised land anymore like the children of Israel needed. No, that's what Jesus is for us. And so for my life, what that looks like for me is, I live here now in Marietta, and I live in a nice house that my wife and I both love, but I could move tomorrow. And in life, not ultimately because it's Jesus, but like in life, I'm at home with Brooke. I'm at home with my wife. That's where I feel like I'm at home. And whether we live here or Michigan or New York or Texas or Mississippi, just kidding, I'd never live there. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. Wherever that is, I feel like I'm at home with her. And I think as followers of Jesus, that's what we're supposed to pursue. I think that's where we're supposed to be. No matter what situation is going on around us, no matter where we're at in this like long road of COVID-19, it's not really about where we're at or where we're going. It's about who we're with. And as Jesus followers, spoilers, we're supposed to follow Jesus. And if you guys have known me for any amount of time, you know that's the way I like to talk about faith. I don't like to say, oh, I have Jesus in my heart. That's really abstract. People don't know what that means. Or just be like, Jesus is my personal Lord and Savior. No, Jesus is Lord and Savior over everything. And and I get people who say that. If you say that, that's totally cool. I like to say I follow Jesus because I feel like that paints a really good picture. And so in this time of uncertainty, in this time of constant change, in this long road trip that we're all on together, be mobile, be patient, but also don't find your home necessarily in locations and situations. Find your home, find your rest in Jesus and in following Jesus. That is the one thing that you can keep consistent throughout. And that is the one thing that will bring you the most peace in any and every situation. So what if during this time you use this as an opportunity to practice being more mobile? What if the good that the Lord is bringing about from this bad, awful situation is that you're learning to be more patient? What if in all of this chaos, you're actually able to kind of cipher through and discern what needs to go in your life and what needs to stay? And what if this is more forging your bond and your closeness and your relationship with Jesus? We're wrapping up the series. We're going to get into your book next week. So grace and peace to you guys. I'm going to keep driving.